So today we're going to kind of transition from bandsaw and other things that we've used to now talking about our table saw that has a Dado blade set up on. This is called a stacked Dado blade. All I want to talk about to begin with is the safety of this tool. Really, all the rules are the exact same as our table saw. We want to make sure that the material is held down onto the table, into our fence, whatever fence we're using, and we have to drive it across nice and straight. Just like on the table saw, the accidents happen when you're going to cross it, if it twists at all, because then it's going to want to grab that and throw it backwards. Obviously, we don't want to put our fingers in there, but really what happens is the danger comes from any twisting, because it's going to pinch that blade and want to send it backwards. And you can see the size of the blade on there. This one's 3/4 of an inch. It's set up to be 3/4 of an inch. So that is a huge cut that's going to be taken out of this. And the more material we're taking, the slower we want to go across there. So again, down onto our fence and nice and straight, slowly across there. The other difference here on this table saw versus our other table saw, we have our fence over here, and then we also have a different version of the fence here, which is called the miter gauge. For the cuts that you guys are doing on your first year project, all of our cuts are going across the grain. That means we have to use a miter gauge. If we were going with the grain, we could bring our fence over and use that fence exactly like the regular table saw. But on this one, we're going to be using the miter gauge. This particular miter gauge has some clamps on here, and we'll get a better view of those in a moment. So in this case though, with this particular tool, instead of having to worry about keeping our board tight to this fence, we're going to think about the head of the miter gauge here as our fence. We have to hold the board tight to this fence as we go across. So we're going to hold it down, tight to this fence, and slowly across, and that is how we're going to make our cuts on here. And really that's the only safety feature. As long as we have things set up right, down, in, slowly across, okay? Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is, if we look at our piece of paper here that had our plans on it, the thing that we learned previously was on part D and part E, where we're making those lap joints, where we can kind of cut out the corners and cut out the middle section of D so that those fit together. And today what we're going to be learning about is our part B, and this is called the Dado cut. And then the bottom of part D, which is known as the Rabbet cut. So let's talk about quickly, basically laying out our board here. So if we can kind of get this focused here, I'll try to hold it better. This in the middle here is our Rabbet cut that we're going to be making. Your Rabbet cut is going to be 5/8 of an inch deep, 1 1/4 inches wide, and your Rabbet cut is going to be 1 1/4 inches into the board, and then only 1/4 inch deep into it there. And then they're going to go all the way through both sides of those. So that's what our layout looks like. That's what yours should look like. Obviously this board doesn't have the miters on it, and I'm putting them both on one because this is just a demonstration piece. Yours will be on part B and part D respectively when you do your cuts. Okay, so now I've got this kind of set up at a weird angle, but we are going to talk about setting up the saw before we do any of our cutting, and there are a few things that we want to look at. The first being, remember that we're going to be using the miter gauge instead of the fence to slide our board across. And so what you want to do here is you're going to take the blade of the miter gauge, of the square, and basically all I'm doing is I'm sliding it up to make sure that my miter gauge is totally square. Mine is not right now. So I loosen this handle right here. Make sure that it lines up with my blade now, and then I'm going to retighten that real good, and then I'm going to check it from the other way, and nice and perfectly square there, and double check that, make sure it's nice and tight. So now the angle of the miter gauge head is set up the right way we need it to. And we can just set that in our table saw channel right there. And now we come back and we look at this again. Let's start with our Rabbet cut, okay? because on the Rabbet cut it's a little bit easier. I only have to worry about hitting this one line, not anything over here. Just this one right there. So, setting it up again. If you remember on the Rabbet cut, we need to be a 1/4 inch high, okay, in terms of how high the blade is above the table. So we use the wheel here on the power switch side, just like on our other table saw. And we are going to raise the blade, lower the blade in this case, to a 1/4 of an inch. So I'm eyeballing down the table. I don't know how well the camera will be able to pick this up, but I'm looking at it like this, getting the blade to a 1/4 inch above the table. The next thing you want to check is the width of your blade, because this does change as students use this particular setup here. Right now we're just a little under 3/4. If I'm going to get 3/4 out of one cut, that means that on 1 1/4 inches, I'm going to need to make more than one pass. So here's how we do this. Okay, this is the setup. We've checked the width, we've checked the height, we've checked the angle of this, and now we'll kind of talk a little bit about safety here. So again, in some cases, if you're going with the grain, I would use the fence just like on a normal table saw. In our case, we're going to be going across the grain of the board, right? Our cut's going to go this way. This is the grain. We're going to go across it to make our cut. So we're using a miter gauge, and so our fence becomes the head of this miter gauge. I'm going to pinch it to this. My hands stay right inside the miter gauge. I don't hold it out here like this, because then I'm in line with my blade. So I'm out of the way over here. My back hand goes on the knob behind the head. The left hand's going to pinch it to it, and that's how I'll drive it across, okay? But when we go to set it up, what I'm looking for is that line to be right on the edge of that tooth right there. Hopefully the camera picks that up okay. If I'm going to miss, I would rather miss and then have to go back and cut more. I don't want to miss and take too much off right away. So I'm going to play it kind of conservative, back it up, hold it down onto the table, and then I'm going to set up my clamps to hold that down. Okay, so I'm ready to, I had to back those screws out a little bit, and it's going to take me a second, so I paused it. These screws here just turn by hand, and they help me hold this down. So I go a little bit tight there, just finger tight, a little bit there, go back to the other one. And I keep working my way back and forth from the front to the back, front to the back, so that hopefully then you can see that it's totally supported in there. You don't want to trust those completely. I still am going to use my hands right here, my left hand, to pinch that in there, and I'm going to drive it across right like this, all right? And I think that we are now ready to make our cut. I've got it lined up, I've got my blade set up, clamped down here. Most importantly, I don't want that board twisting. I want to go straight across, nice and controlled. Might get a little loud here for a minute. My hands are going to be in place here, clamping it in, my right hand on the back, and I'm just going to bring it across. Let it get up to full speed. Drive it all the way across. Don't take it backwards. We're going to lift it straight up. Take it off. Turn the machine off. And just kind of wait for it to stop. This saw does take a while for it to slow down, so you just got to be kind of patient here. Okay. So now you can see I started that one, and now I just got to take the rest of it off. So I begin loosening my clamps here with the machine off. Slide it back up while it's still off, and get whatever's left over centered on my blade, and tighten these down again. Back it away, turn it on, and we'll do it again. All the way across, lift it up, and turn it off. so our blade's now stopped. I can loosen these. Take my board out. I can see that my cut has been made there. And what I always like to do then is test it. So I've got another piece of my material that's set up at the right thickness and width. Obviously it's just scrap, but you can see then that this is how the rabbet cut works. Is those go together and form a nice little joint right there. And that's the rabbet cut. Okay, so now we've got the rabbet cut done, and it's time to do the dado cut through the center. The difference on the dado cut is that it has two edges I have to worry about, and I also have to change the height of it. So I come back to my wheel, and now I'm going to be going to 5/8 of an inch. And remember, I'd rather go on the low side. I can always cut more off than go too high and then be kind of out of luck there. So I've got that set up. You can notice that the blade is, significantly higher than it was for the 1/4 inch cut. So that means I want to go even slower because I'm removing more material. Grab our board. It is up to you how you want to line it up. If you want to start over on this edge, that's fine. If you want to start over on this edge, that's fine too. I'm going to start on the right-hand side and get that lined up good. I'm just rotating the blade to get a tooth lined up right on my edge so I can see exactly where I want to be. Again, cutting too little rather than too much, but I'm trying to get it right the first time. And now I'm clamping the board down. Worked my way back and forth from the front to the back. Got it where I want it. I'm going to bring it back. And you can see here I have much less material to hold on to. But it doesn't change anything. All it changes is I want to go nice and slow because I'm cutting so much. So we'll go ahead and make this cut now. Up to full speed. I'm pinching it really good. My hands are behind it. All the way across, lift it straight up, and we turn it off. Okay, our blade is stopped. We're back here. I can now loosen up these set screw clamps. I'm going to bring the board up just like I did before. Get my teeth lined up where I want them just so I can aim it. And now I'm worried about this side, so this left edge and this side of the blade. Being conservative again, back it up. Clamp it down. And I'm going to go very slowly across there. Our saw blade is stopped, and it's time to kind of check out and see how we did. So there's my dado cut now. I apologize if I've messed up and used the wrong term there. So kind of the moment of truth to test your other piece. So for you guys, this will be piece E trying to fit into piece B. And you can see there, I'm very, very close, but not quite. I'll bring it a little closer. When I go to slide this one in there, it's just off by a little bit. Oops, that didn't help you. Won't quite wedge in there. So what does that mean? If you look closely at what I have here, you can see that there's a little bit of pencil left on this side. Maybe you guys can't see it, but there's a little bit of pencil. So that's the side I'm going to try to shave off just a little bit more. Bring it back in here, loosen up my screws. Maybe. There we go. And I just want to take a slight amount off there. Aim it carefully. Work on my set screws to clamp it in. Back it off and turn it on. Taking these off while the blade stops. If you ever get these too tight, which has happened lots of times, it might happen to me right now, you can do a couple of things. You can clamp down the other side, and that will help you, or you can go get some pliers to take those out. So my board's free, and let's see if we can make this work now. And you can see I got a pretty good connection. I might need to kind of pound this one in or clamp that one in a little bit more, but I'd rather have it pretty snug than have big gaps around it, okay? So if I were to kind of, you can see just that little bit of tunking gives me a pretty tight fit around there, which is what I want. And that is how you make your dado cut.